All right, today we're going to cut right through the confusion around one of the most important and honestly most misunderstood parts of UAE VAT, zero-rated supplies. Think of this as your practical guide to getting it right, staying compliant, and, protecting your bottom line. Let's get into it.
You see this? This right here is probably one of the most common and most costly mistakes businesses make. People use these terms like they're the same thing all the time, but to the tax authority, they are worlds apart. And mixing them up can land you in some serious hot water. Because,
well, they just don't. They aren't the same. And getting that difference locked in is absolutely critical for your business.
So, here's our game plan for the next few minutes. We're going to start with that huge difference between zero-rated and exempt. Then we'll look at exactly when you can apply zero rating, the super strict conditions you've got to meet, and the proof you'll need. We'll also cover some expensive mistakes to avoid and wrap it all up with a simple checklist to keep you on the straight and narrow. Okay, let's start with the absolute foundation. Seriously, if you get this part wrong, everything else kind of falls apart. This is the single most important distinction for any business in the UAE to really get. Now, on the surface, they look almost identical, right? For both, you don't charge your customer any VAT. But the real magic, the critical difference, is what happens with the VAT you paid on your own business costs. That's your input VAT. With zero-rated supplies, you get to claim that money back. With exempt supplies, you don't. That one little detail can have a massive impact on your cash flow and profit. So now that we know why zero rating is so good for business, the big question is, when can you actually use it? This isn't something you can just decide to do. It only applies to very specific types of goods and services that are spelled out in the law. And the UAE VAT law gives us a pretty clear list. As you can see, it hits some major parts of the economy, especially things tied to global trade, like exporting goods and international transport. It also covers really important areas, like specific kinds of healthcare and education, plus big-ticket items like new homes and investment-grade metals. Now here's the catch, and trust me, it's a big one. Just because your business is in one of those categories doesn't mean it's automatic. Zero rating is a privilege, not a right, and it comes with some very, very strict conditions. Miss even one of them, and that benefit just disappears. So let's zoom in and look at one of the most common zero-rated situations out there, exporting goods. If you're selling your products to customers outside the region, you'll want to pay close attention here. And this shows you just how specific the rules are. First, you're on a clock. The goods have to be out of the GCC within 90 days. Second, you absolutely must have the official paperwork to prove it. We'll talk more about that in a second. And third, the goods have to be exported in the exact same condition you sold them in. And you have to nail all three of these. Not one, not two, but all three. And for services, yep, the rules are just as precise. The whole thing really hinges on your customer. They can't be a resident of the UAE, and they need to be physically outside the country when you're actually providing the service. And it makes sense, right? If your service is directly tied to something physically in the UAE, like fixing a building, it generally won't qualify. Okay, this slide is a perfect example of how fine the line can be. Take healthcare. A preventive checkup with your doctor? That's zero rated. But something cosmetic? That's not. Same goes for education. The actual tuition for an approved curriculum is zero rated, but all the extras, like the school uniform or the cafeteria lunch, those are subject to the standard 5% VAT. The details really, really matter. We have mentioned evidence a few times, and that's because, well, it's everything. It's completely non-negotiable. If you can't prove you met the conditions, then as far as the law is concerned, you didn't. Having the right paperwork is your only defense if you ever face a VA audit. So what does that proof actually look like when you're exporting goods? You need two main things. First, you need that official confirmation from customs that the goods have left the region. Second, you need commercial proof, the transport documents, like a bill of lading for sea freight or an airway bill for air cargo, that show the goods were delivered somewhere outside the GCC. And that brings us to the risks. We've talked about all the rules and all the proof you need, but what actually happens when things go wrong? Well, the financial hit can be pretty significant. So let's just imagine it. You exported your goods, but you can't find the bill of lading. Or maybe the shipment went out on day 91, not inside the 90-day window. What's the real consequence? This is the consequence. That supply is no longer zero rated. Poof!
it defaults back to the standard rate, and you, the supplier, are now on the hook for 5% VAT on that sale. Think about it, a 100,000 dirhams export deal, you price it 0%. One missing document, and suddenly you owe 5,000 dirhams straight out of your own pocket.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground, so let's pull it all together and boil it down to a final, simple compliance checklist. These are the key things you need to walk away with. Here you go. Number 1, zero-rated is not exempt. Always remember, you can get your input VAT back on zero-rated supplies. 2, your paperwork is your proof. Without it, you have nothing. 3, it doesn't matter what you meant to do. All that matters is what the evidence proves you actually did. And finally, getting this right isn't just about avoiding penalties, it's about smart financial management. And so we end with a question, one for you to take back to your business. Now that you've seen how strict these rules are and the kind of proof you need, are you really confident that your process is solid? Are you using the 0% rate correctly when you can? And just as important, do you have the proof sitting in a file ready to back it all up?